Okay. Welcome to the Architectural Review Board meeting for August 3rd, 2017. Can we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Liu.
Present.
Vice Chair Kim.
Here.
Board Member Guyer. Here. Board Member Balte.
Present.
And Board Member Firth is excused.
Now is the time for oral communications. For items that are not on the agenda, I do have David Carnahan from the City Clerk's office here. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Chair Liu and board members. David Carnahan in the City Clerk's office. I'm here to speak with you about Board and Commission recruitment. You should have all received an email last night about our current recruitment, which is for the Architectural Review Board, the Historic Resources Board, and the Planning and Transportation Commission. We're accepting applications through September 19th at 4:30 p.m., and we encourage each of you to reach out to at least one or two people. If you are one of the people whose term is up on this board, we of course would not expect you to encourage someone to compete against you, but for the other boards, we'd like you to reach out and see if you have any, members of the community that you think would get some value out of serving on one of these boards and commissions and could add value for the community. Applications are available on the city's website, cityofpaloalto.org/clerk. And again, the application deadline is September 19th at 4:30 p.m. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, David. And we don't have any agenda changes today, so we can move on to the first item, which is number 2. It's a public hearing for a quasi-judicial matter, 1451 Middlefield Road, consideration of an application for architectural review to allow the demolition of the Junior Museum and Zoo building and construction of a new 15,033 square foot, one-story museum and education building, outdoor zoo with netted enclosure, and reconfiguration of site improvements to the existing parking lots, including fire access accessible parking stalls, multimodal circulation, storm drainage, infrastructure, and site lighting. And the environmental assessment is an initial study has been prepared in accordance with CEQA, and the zone district is public facilities. And welcome, we have our Chief Planning Official, Amy French, here today.
Good morning, Amy French. I'm here to present the project that is returning to you after several preliminary meetings. So I just have a couple of fun photos. This I showed to the HRB on June 22nd when we last appeared before them, and they recommended approval of this. The Lucy Stern complex dates back to 1937. Here's an old photo that shows that along Middlefield, it was pretty much a park. And then it took some time after the original Stern complex, in the matter of 3 or 4 years, to come in with the Junior Museum and Zoo and the library and the Girl Scout house in its current location. Here's what it looks like today with our crazy parking lot that is to be rectified with this project. The context is 1 to 2 story buildings. It feels 1 story, but there are 2 story elements of the Junior Museum and Zoo and Lucy Stern. The Lucy Stern Center is a Category 1 resource. Many buildings are included in that. We're interested in having the Girl Scout house become one of the listed items. It is not currently today. There's an interest in moving a bird bath from the Girl Scout house over to where the Boy Scouts are located. And the Henry Hoover House was mentioned in the last meeting. Since the last HRB meeting, there was a study done, the Rinconada Park Long Range Plan Historic Resource Evaluation, and that determined that this Girl Scout house is eligible for listing as a historic resource. Here's some other images of the area behind the Girl Scout house and the parking area behind the Stern Theater and scene shop there. So back in January, the ARB and the HRB reviewed in study sessions some concept plans. Those concept plans were then changed, and the ARB looked at that version and provided some support as far as that approach. And the applicant's going to summarize what you said back in March in their presentation. The revised plans were shown to the HRB. Then there's been slight revisions since then that the applicant will provide. The HRB on June 22nd requested that an HRB subcommittee review the roof colors in their effort to look at compatibility. They were very pleased with the the switch to gable roofs. They just had a question about the color and asked for alternatives to come to an HRB subcommittee. The initial study is being prepared and finalized this week and will be available on Friday. So that will be circulated to the HRB and ARB for any comments there. Right, and then, so today we're going to be asking you to continue this item either to a date certain or a date uncertain so that the CEQA document can run its course for public comments, and we'll be back before you with findings and conditions set for approval. And when I say approval, it's recommendation to the City Council. So the HRB subcommittee has weighed in 2 out of 3 so far via email to me. They have not met as a board, but the question came up about the taupe roof that was proposed. Charcoal roof was an alternative, and red roof was another. I don't think either of the ones that I spoke with so far preferred the red roof altogether. But here is an image that one of the HRB members, Margaret Wimmer, was saying if you went with charcoal, which she thought blended better with the red as far as not contrasting as much, then it's a little bit too dark in the courtyard. So she suggested maybe pulling down the red to make it more whimsical there. So that's our presentation on staff. And let me introduce again John Aiken. While I load the other presentation, the architect will present.
Great. Let me quickly review the goals of the project, which are to right-size the building for our current programs and audience, to seek accreditation with the American Alliance of Museums and the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, as well as tailor the spaces to better suit visitors and make it safe for kids to interact with animals. And with that, let me introduce Cody Anderson-Wozni. We've got Brent McClure and Sarah Vaccaro here, and I'll let them take it away.
Thanks, John. Brent McClure, CAW Architects. Board, thank you very much for having us back again to present this exciting project. We're going to just get this. We've got a short PowerPoint. We wanted to briefly recap what we had shown you, I think, and talked about before at the last meeting. This is the site plan. Little to nothing has changed with the horseshoe-shaped building around the Dawn Redwood Courtyard. And what we talked about a lot last time was this sort of strong pedestrian promenade that links you into the park and establishes a lot of these, connecting points, thinking about the context, thinking about this as a civic project and having much stronger presence both within its surrounding neighbors and public use. We spent a lot of time with you talking about sort of this exterior experience along the way and how do we engage a child's curiosity as we move through these spaces. And if you recall, we talked about sort of before the experience starts on Middlefield or it starts in the park itself as you get drawn and kind of pulled into the museum itself with a lot of experiences that are open to the public outside the building, which is along the promenade. These included, we talked about things of scale, areas where kids can play, establishing a watershed, can we illustrate wind in a creative way, and also play with light and sort of just also the elements as well. And then the massing model that we showed you at that study session was in essence, I think it was this image that you see before you now. And so we've maintained this form and this overall concept, but lots has developed since then. The comments that we had heard at the meeting was there's a lot with this design that we heard positive feedback, which was terrific, on the focus of the site and the scale and the civic context and whatnot. Comments that we had noted were, can we rethink the promenade and how it intersects and connects with the Girl Scout building, and how does it turn to kind of go into the park, and can we, shove something back 20 feet or magically figure out a way to do that? That was one comment we had noted. I think there's a comment from Board Member Abalte about modulation and really kind of trying to think about that elevation along Middlefield. I think all the elevations we'd brought forward to you before were, kind of more of a clean, sort of modern, lengthy aesthetic, and there was encouragement to explore, hey, this is a residential neighborhood. Can we break the scale down in different ways, and how can we sort of animate that facade? And then another comment was really kind of you all wanting to see more, obviously, and the details and sense of scale and looking at some more of the fine-grained elements that we didn't have, obviously, with this model here. So to walk you around the building, this is an overall sort of rendering as to where we are to date. I think the best way to kind of, what I'd like to do is kind of walk around the site and maybe just kind of start from the Middlefield approach and sort of talk about the building, not so much just elevation by elevation and massing and whatnot, but really how you would then experience the facility. And so what we've done is, this perspective is along Middlefield Road. The program that's inside this wing here consists of classrooms, zoo exhibit museum archives and storage back in over here, and then office space as well. And this is the elevation. And then this is that entry portal. Before, we just had sort of this open slot. And what we've wanted to do is really kind of punctuate that and make it fun and whimsical. And actually, we're working towards designing a rainbow kaleidoscope tunnel, if you will, so that as you kind of pass through, you go from light to dark. And we get lights in all different types of colors coming in from different skylights. We've looked to sort of break this down to kind of have more of some solid here, a punctuated window that could have some display, and then classroom and office windows that are modulated back in here. You can kind of see more in this elevation. As you enter through one of the other things we're looking to do is also think about thresholds and that experience. And so as you even leave the sidewalk, we're exploring ways and looking to have this read as a bridge, so there'd be a little bit of a watershed, if you will, kind of in and around with plants and whatnot, so that as you enter into the kaleidoscope tunnel, you would be kind of walking along this bridge element here to enter into the building. We're looking to facet the inside of this space, neck the ceiling down, kind of pull the walls in. We're looking to do this economically, and we'll be looking to probably even do some mock-ups to make sure that we can get the effect that we're looking for. But in essence, solar tubes that would have either prisms and or diachromatic film within them to kind of get that effect. So this is a plan section, and then this is an elevation section through that space. As you then emerge through the tunnel, you're then on that walkway into this Dawn Redwood Courtyard, and there's two different zones. There's sort of this that we're having to address, and one is there's a space that the users are looking to kind of contain and have be fenced in, and then there's an area that's open to the public, which is the promenade along this edge. So this is where we enter into sort of the watershed and a bridged sidewalk with depressions and raised areas of plantings. And then we have a reed fence that you can kind of see in this elevation back in here. So we're looking to sort of playfully separate and design fencing that isolates the public area from the paid experience. And then back in over here is a series of walkways around the building of natural materials, and then some planter areas where, as part of the exhibit design, they'll be looking to bring in really exciting and different unique plants, have it themed as a Jurassic garden so that it becomes this sort of educational opportunity to leverage outdoor space within this courtyard. Because I think, as you might recall, when we talked about this project, every square inch is precious because we're very, very budget constrained. Finishes in and around here, I'll talk about finishes in a minute. We can come back to the renderings. And then here's another section through that space looking at some of the planting. And then the view overall sort of from the parking is this entry piece in through here. So here's the courtyard. We've kind of quieted, there's the entrance tunnel as you walk along this edge, but the buildings read somewhat quiet so that the entrance is really played up and focused. And what we've done is we've taken the end gable concept and thinking of doing it economically, and we're basically using almost like a barn-like or a butler building kind of concept in construction, and then using some natural materials as far as the wood and the metal, and then it just almost like becomes this extrusion as this comes out, so that you don't have this hard, sharp face, and we're creating this courtyard that's partially enclosed with trellis, and then this artist windscreen that will be part of the our artist in residence that will be part of this project is to design this wind sculpture that will actually become part of the facade of the building. So we're trying to get as much into the space as possible. Here's some sample images of what sections through that area would look like. And then as you move down the way and around the pecan tree, there will be some outdoor play areas and whatnot. Here's a section through the portico that I was just describing, and some representative images of sort of the aesthetic that we're looking for. And it is these sort of bent steel with these Z-girts that then extrude out, uplighting and downlighting, and then some little punctuated window view spots onto either side here, as well as a little trellis piece over there. So this is a section through that portico that's out at the front of the street, or at the main entrance before you enter the building. And then a sample wall section through the building here. We're looking to get some thickness and some heft as you kind of express that main form of the dominant form of the museum itself, but clean, taut eaves and detailing and whatnot. So to kind of talk more about that, this kind of represents sort of the finishes. We're using a combination, we've got a sample board we'll hand out, a combination of wood siding and then standing seam roof. The whole building would be roofed with standing seam, and then to differentiate it a little bit, we were looking to kind of have this playfulness of that the museum, the main museum piece, it's a story and a half, would then have that finish wrapped down. There'd be those deep recesses over here that I was just talking about. Out in the trellis area, there's this punctuated view window that looks out into the watershed zone with the windscreen above, so that we're trying to kind of have this processional effect as you move and kind of draw you in and then pull and simultaneously pull you out. Site finishes, kind of echoing some of the same materials, a combination of concrete and wood finishes to sort of soften the space. We talked about the zoo netting before. And then as you move into the park, those boundaries would consist of integral colored stucco plaster walls and wood fencing. We've done that for economical reasons. But then having those sort of nest in and around each other. Let's go to the next slide. There we go. So this is a rendering kind of illustrating some of that. So as you're in the park area, this is a kid flying a kite. That's not part of the building. We're looking at having that rust red colored plaster wall here, and then wood fencing that kind of nests in and wraps in and around. And then in some key moments, like along this one section here, we're looking at having some graphics on the fencing to illustrate a sense of scale and patterning and whatnot, to sort of suggest, that, hey, this is a children's museum and there's exciting things that are happening within here. And then just a couple of footnotes. We've talked, I think, at the last meeting about this sort of phase 2 portion of the site. The phase 2 of this 2-story building is not part of the review. The client has made a decision to kind of defer that, I think, at this time, so it's more of just one fine day and not part of the application at this point. The zoo, we haven't changed anything at this point with what's inside, other than, that there's the netting with the columns that spring off of the walls themselves. And then imagery of the phase 2 building that I just mentioned, and that's it. So,
great, thank you very much,
Thank you.
If there are any members of the public that want to speak to this item, now would be the time. Otherwise, we'll bring it back to the board for questions. No questions? Okay.
No.
Yes, Peter.
Yes, for the applicant, I guess. I noticed in your write-up about the project, you talked extensively about the concept of a tunnel from Middlefield and then a bridge at the Dawn Courtyard. On the plans, I see a concrete sidewalk. Can you explain what's really the presentation and why?
We've been going through in real time in the last couple of months here, from the application submittal and the narratives to where we are today, looking at costs, and one of the things that the client has looked at is a reduction at that spot. I think what we'll look to do is the contractors indicated that to do something that's not a complete and true bridge through there is more cost effective to have it be more of a solid piece. What we'd be looking to do is to either have some edges that cantilever out, and maybe there could be some sections that could tunnel through, so we can give the implication that you're still up and above to create that same effect. That's kind of where we're at with that piece.
Thank you.
Okay. So when do we have board member comments? Hugh?
Thank you for coming back to the board with this project. It's a very exciting project, and overall I'm very pleased with the direction that it's been headed in. I think the amount of work that you've put into the project in this amount of time is actually quite impressive. I have some very minor comments, but overall I'm very pleased with mostly everything, from the design of the site plan to the actual building itself, even down to the materials. Why don't I pick up on the materials then? As far as the roofing material, I can see and understand perhaps some of the concerns that the HRB has brought up, but for me, I think this building wants to be as environmentally friendly as possible and kind of in tune with the surroundings and the site. And to me, I think going with that darker roof color is actually creating more of a heat island effect, and that would be my primary concern with the darker color. I think the taupe here, in correlation with the more red color, actually looks quite handsome, and I think it would work fine. And I appreciate the fact that you're kind of accenting the skylights with that red color as well. One of the newer changes that I'm seeing with this set of plans, as it's developed from the last time that you've presented to us, is that tunnel connection from Middlefield to the main entrance to the museum. And I've been kind of going back and forth with this. I think the way that it was originally presented, it almost looked like a transparent area or section of that gable that became kind of the tunnel. And I thought from a simplicity standpoint that actually worked very well, and it looked kind of interesting in the fact that you were changing from perhaps an opaque kind of roof to a more transparent kind of roof. But I see that you've presented this gable scheme and this tunnel that goes from a larger opening towards Middlefield to a smaller opening towards the main entry to the museum. And I was kind of thinking back to architectural history, and a lot of the Chinese, Japanese, Korean gardens actually had these smaller portals that you would enter into, not because of any height difference, but really more so that you're creating this gesture of kind of bowing as you entered. And I really like that that you're making this tunnel larger on Middlefield and smaller towards the entry to the museum. It's kind of this similar experience of even adults being kind of transformed into being a child again. And I thought that was very nice. So I think I'm okay with this new gable, but the primary concern that I have is how often is it going to be used? I think the majority of the people that are going to visit the museum are going to park in the parking lot, and to have them go through the reverse process of going out to Middlefield and then back in seems a little bit like a missed opportunity, and I wonder if people are actually going to experience it in the desired manner. So that was a comment on that, but I think the idea and the concept of that tunnel is actually quite impressive, and it's too bad that we can't maybe perhaps we can even think about moving that somewhere to the main entry of the museum. Looking at the main entry of the museum, I'm glad that you're showing us a little bit of a different placement in the signage. I was a little disappointed in the original yellow signage that was directly in the middle of the gable. I like that you've pushed it off to the side and that the art piece, the windscreen, becomes more of the feature there. I would just question if that windscreen has to be so rectangular and so plain as a shape. Perhaps it can follow the gable shape up and become more triangular towards the top. And then I guess we'll hold off any comments on that future two-story building since it's not a part of this proposal. Looking through the set of plans, thank you for providing so much information, even these concept diagrams. Just a minor comment on the phase 1 proposed floor plan. You have these very dark shadow lines, I think. It took me a while to understand that they were shadow lines, but they kind of obscure the drawing so much that it becomes more of a distraction. But that's a very minor comment as we're just picking up on the drawings. And I think that's really it for me. I like the depth and richness of the materials that are combined with the simple gable forms, and I appreciate the amount of thought that's been put into it. I understand that it's a difficult challenge trying to balance out all these wonderful concepts along with the budget. So I applaud your efforts, and I am interested to hear what my fellow board members think. Thank you.
Robert.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a great step forward. I really like what you've done. The biggest concern I have, and it was also in your presentation, you keep talking about economy, trying to make it cost effective and everything else. And I mean, that I understand, what the reality of life is, but you could also, a building like this is intended to be around for a while, so I don't want to see it where you construct it too cheaply that you end up with a maintenance nightmare for the next 50 years or whatever. We all know one of these buildings is going to, whether they intend to or not, seems to stick around for 50 or so years. That's just the reality of it. It's interesting you mentioned the term Butler building, because that's what I had in my notes also, that it looked like a modified Butler building. And I don't really want to push that too much. So the biggest concern here is going to be, as with any metal building like this, is you're going to probably have to spend a few bucks on making sure that the metal is covered, meaning either a powder coating type situation or whatever the case is, and not just painting it and hoping that, in 10 years, the maintenance staff at the museum will repaint it or whatever the case is. The elevation, I think the elevation on Middlefield is a big improvement. The only thing might be, if anything, is that possibly that middle section that is the darker color, possibly you kick the roof up a couple of feet just to break up that enormous continuous roof. That's the only thing I have a bit of a problem with, to bring the...
Which section? I'm sorry?
This one, the top one you've got there, that very long uniform roof line. I'm saying the section in the middle where the windows are the darker red color.
Okay.
Possibly kick that section up a couple of feet or something, just to break up that very long elevation.
So maybe the roof
Well, literally, and
differentiation
the thing
follows
is,
where the
with that
windows
kind
are.
of construction, you can just kick it up a couple of feet and it's fine. So the cost issue is not that tremendous a difference. As to this whole difference of opinion as far as color, I personally prefer the taupe color. I think it works better than the charcoal, and I think you ought to stay with that. I do like the entry. I've been involved with a couple of projects that over the years that deal with kids. I mean, I'd love to see that entry, which I know nowadays in our code-infested design process wouldn't allow it, but I would love to see that entry drop down to about 5'6", where the parent has to duck down, which means it becomes sort of the haven of the children, and the parents sort of have to work at it to get into that same. But we both know that the building official would laugh at that. But anyway, be that as it may, I think, or I should say, I like that whole entry concept, the whole idea that this is for the kids, not for the parents. As far as the bridge, I could see it. It would have been nice, and maybe, it's the kind of thing that sometime in the future you get some generous donor that you could turn it into the whatever ABC bridge that they donated or whatever. All in all, I think it's a big improvement, and I could vote for it like this with just a few minor modifications.
Okay, Peter.
Thank you. More or less, I echo the comments of my colleagues, perhaps not quite ready to completely support it, but I'd like to comment that I looked at your drawing A1.3, and I don't think I've ever seen a drawing that more clearly explains an architectural concept. And I just was sort of thinking back over the process, and I really would like to compliment, it's been a pleasure to see good architects really work to come up with a concept and push it forward. And this is really, it's really nice to see you grasping what a kids' museum should be like and then trying to give form to that. And this notion of a tunnel and then a bridge and then shelter leading to the park is really powerful. I say that in part because I want you to feel good about it, in part because I'd like to see you push harder to keep that bridge. The idea of a bridge, of seeing water underneath you, and having that explain why we have a bioswale and a retention system is really, really powerful. That's educational for kids and for adults and for the community. It's a new thing we're trying to accomplish throughout. And it seems to me that's something that's really worth fighting for. So I'd just like to encourage you to give it as much of a push as you can to go on the record that it's an integral part of your very strong concept. This is award-winning stuff, this kind of concept, and executing it is great. Okay, but there's always a but. I agree we want to make an architecture of our time. I'd like you to encourage thinking about making it of our place as well. And I'm troubled by this, what's essentially an agricultural building. We've used the term Butler building, but it really is a metal shed, and I think you're not quite getting away from that enough. And this is the heart of Palo Alto and a very important civic building, and it, I think, has the risk of looking like a farm shed, especially the main part where you choose to run the metal roofing down as siding, right down the edge. That's exactly what a farmer does out in Stockton, and that's not where we are, and that's not really appropriate. And I think that we've missed that takes away from the Burge-Clark designs where you have a distinct roof and a wall. They're very different textures, colors, materials. And I don't want to tell you what the architecture should be, but I'd almost prefer to see it all be the same with just a wood siding and a roof than having that metal roll down the side. I think that will look just too industrial, too agricultural. And then Robert's concern about the painting is very real. That metal siding, the paint will eventually start to flake off no matter what you do. They'll never have enough money to maintain that. It's an expensive kind of thing to paint. You've set them up for a long-term failure with that very, very inexpensive idea to begin with. So again, I think it needs just a little bit more there. So I keep saying it may be of our time, but it's not yet of our place, which is equally important. Another concern I have is the middle field elevation. I've expressed this before, and I think you're making steps towards doing things. It's really nice to see the gable end picking up the motif of the building coming out on Middlefield, but overall it's one long, straightforward, low building on the street that's quite long. So I did go out there again just to check, and it is about the only place where you'd have this long a building that's this continuous. And I think Robert's absolutely correct that changing the roof is probably the way to break it up, but I'd really like to see you get some more modulation on that facade, if you could, an in and out or a breakup or some sense of another utility entrance. I was hoping that the trees and the fact that you're driving by quickly would break it up, but at least in my judgment, when you go out there, that's really not the case. It's quite visible. That really will be the frontage, the face of the building to most of the public as we drive by it every day. And it's just not quite there. It's come a long way since your first concepts, but if you could put half the energy you put into the creativity, figuring out how to make this for a kid, and figure out how to make it for Palo Alto as well. How do we build next to Burge-Clark? Well, we see both of these in the same space of 30 seconds as we drive by. That would really be appreciated. So I don't think it's quite there yet on those two factors. The facade along Middlefield is still too uniform, and I'm concerned about the overall gable form where the siding drops down the side, giving it too much of an agricultural look. On a detail, I do share Q's sense that the metal screen over the entry would be better served if it followed the gable on the inside. I'm just putting that out there as a detail. But middle field elevation, rethink the agricultural look. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Peter. So I don't have a lot to add to this particular, to the other board members' comments. I think the project, to me, it looks great. It seems to me that I could meet the findings for this project. In my notes, I just have some nitpicky details. One is like the wood slats at the entry porch. I guess I was curious about the finish of those, if there was like a stain that would be applied to the wood and the maintenance, long-term maintenance of them. It's a high maintenance item and it's a city project, and so that's a concern. If you had like a transparent stain, it's only going to last maybe 2 years before it would need to be touched up. So that's a concern, and that's a concern that the board has had on other city projects as well. And in the other projects, they've been changed to, like on the Mitchell Park Library, I think the architect changed it to metal. I think they'd considered e-pay. So I'd like to see more information on that. Also on the building, you're showing, I guess it's like an 8-foot wood and stucco fence along the park side, along that. And I did see that in the perspective, and I think I understand the details. I would like to just have a detail in the set. It seems to me like whenever I've done those wood slats, the size of the boards and the spacing of the boards is really important. And it was an issue with the board on the Art Center project. And also just the species of wood and the grade of the wood. On your landscaping plan, I think you were showing small Cape Rush along the Middlefield Road planter strips. And so those are like 2 to 3 feet high. And I guess I would ask to consider having something within the door zone that's lower. Right, I mean, typically if there are typically lots of cars parked along that section of Middlefield, and so when they open the door, usually if a plant is 3 feet high, it'll get damaged by somebody opening the door. So I would consider something smaller along the curb. I think the plant is fine otherwise outside of that door opening zone. And on the colors, I did want to sort of echo the comments about the maintenance of it. And I would just say, like an example of what went wrong was, like there's the CVS store on Middlefield Road, which has the red metal, kind of like a mansard roof. And it looked terrible when it was faded, and people were complaining, and they weren't repainting it and stuff. And I don't want that to happen on this particular project. It seems like I'll defer to the other board members, but it seems like you were mentioning like the powder coating or the Kynar finishes are much more durable than the painted finish. I don't know how long those last. It seems like the Kynar lasts longer than powder coating, I would think.
But that lasts longer than painting, so that was basically something over and above painting.
Yeah, and then I guess it would go, but I don't know how long how long. And then we have to factor in, like, this is like a city project. And let's say it should last, ideally, right? It would last 50 years, ideally.
We have Kynar 500 coated roofs. After about 20 years, they look faded. Yeah. That's the honest truth. Yep.
So then I guess my next point is that if you have, like, the red, I really actually like the red color, but it seems to me like faded red looks pretty terrible. It looks pink after a while. It seems to me if it's a taupe or charcoal and it fades, nobody's going to notice the difference.
Well, the other thing is like a Core 10, something like that, or whatever.
The guys on the firehouse went to, wasn't it Zinc Aluminum or something?
Yeah, but again, that's very cost prohibitive.
Expensive.
Well, it's cost prohibitive now, but over 50 years, it's probably
Well,
the most cost-effective solution. Well,
But the
they should
average
hear that.
board on something like that isn't going to say yes, but it's going to save our maintenance for the next 50 years.
Yeah, but if we get a pink-looking building 20 years from now.
Okay, so I think that's where we are. I think we want to see more, some more information. And I wasn't quite sure, actually, could I ask a clarification maybe from the architect or maybe Amy? Is the HRB's concerned about it was mentioned that they were concerned about the roof color. Are we saying that the recommendation is that the roof be one color and the siding, metal siding, be a different color?
No,
it's just
I think what one member on the subcommittee thought was if you were going to go with the darker, she liked the darker charcoal, I guess, but thought it was too somber for that courtyard. So suggested, you could pull the red down and have that provide some whimsy.
Okay.
But the other member liked the taupe, so.
Okay, I think I get it. I think my other comment then would be if anybody ever foresees like photovoltaics on the roof, I think charcoal is a better fit for that. Also, if you've got skylights showing on there, again, I think generally like a charcoal color works better with all of those like aluminum skylights in the frame and the dark glass and whatnot. And then for all of the roof penetrations, like plumbing vents and all the fans and all of that stuff, yeah, generally taupe looks better. I mean, red could work. But generally the darker color is a little bit more forgiving. And so that's all that I have. We don't have, I think the recommendation is to continue it. We don't have, I just thought we don't have draft findings, so we're not going to comment on that yet.
It's the sequel that we're waiting for.
Right.
I just have one concern, and you can see I think more than one of us has that concern, the whole thing about the whole concept of it being metal, that you may need to look at doing it something other than metal, or at least if it is metal, the main framing may be metal, but either cover it or something that, to get away from the whole Butler, not even so much appearance, but the concept. I don't have a problem with the way it's shaped, but it's just, I have a fear that, like you said, it's going to turn into a pink building that, with rust all over the place. So I think you need to at least possibly address the concept of using something other than that, or a different framing system or something.
Are we as a board willing to give them more clear direction on that? I really think it's often really helpful if we come out and say it. I mean, to me, the concept of the Kynar 500 coated or any kind of painted standing seam metal, as I listen to our comments, probably is just not the right solution. If you're going to use metal, it really should be something like the zinc aluminum, which is really expensive. So maybe metal's the wrong choice for a civic building that we expect to last a long time.
Could we clarify maybe this? Could we differentiate or separate your comment into the roof and the siding? Because in my mind that the siding needs to last longer than the roof, right? I mean, the roof isn't going to last forever anyway, right? But in theory, the siding should last longer than the roof. I mean, normally we would think a roof was going to last.
The roof
25.
The roof takes more abuse.
Right.
But
right.
you don't typically paint a roof. Well, you don't typically paint metal roofing, siding, the standing seam stuff. Once it's manufactured, you don't repaint it typically. It's very hard to do that.
Yeah. And so then you have another issue is that typically the roof would be replaced before the siding. And so if it's all the same, then there's potential problem, of matching the colors. You're going to have to replace everything.
Do you think Burge Clark built Lucy Stern thinking the roof would be replaced after 25 years? And we're building to make timeless architecture. This is a civic museum. This is a public museum.
But they had the I don't know what the right word is. They built during the Depression, and they were under very different circumstances. And they also built all of those buildings like one at a time because she couldn't sell her Levi Strauss stock. I mean, that was coming out of her, income fund.
There's fascinating history behind it all, but when we're creating civic architecture,
Right,
this
you
is
want
not
it to
another
last.
corporate building.
Right.
And we know full well that maintenance is a real issue over time.
Yep.
It's really hard to find the budget to keep these things up. Now is the time to encourage, to push for the architecture board just to come out and say, standing seam metal on siding certainly, and on roofing is really not appropriate for a building like this when it's painted or when it's...
Okay. I think my take on it is just slightly different, is that I think it's fine for the roof. And then I think the siding, then I think I'm more in agreement with you.
Or at least if that's the case, unfortunately, if you do it for the roof, you need to do a color that even if it fades, really doesn't change that drastically as compared to a pink or a red that goes to a pink. You know, a beige is going to stay a beige, not that I'm saying it needs to be beige, but something like that, you end up with that sort of a criteria.
I'm in agreement with you on that. Okay, any other PQ?
Just another minor comment. I thought the scale of the elevations was much too small for us to read. I guess they would show up a little bit larger on a full-size set, but for us in the half-size sets, they were a little bit small. And then on sheet A4.2, drawing number 4, the elevation A, maybe it was a slightly previous iteration, but to me, I think that gable should be shown on the right side of the building toward Middlefield, and I don't see that there. So just a minor comment.
I have one last question for staff. So on our favorite topic of parking, it seems like there's no there's not a requirement. Generally, there's a net reduction of maybe 2 spaces, but there are loading zones. And I was wondering just how the city was thinking about the parking requirement. And the reason why I'm asking today is that I was just at the site yesterday, and it's the peak of the summer, and the park was in maximum use yesterday. And the parking lot was pretty full. It wasn't completely full. But I was just wondering if the city had any thoughts about adding parking, or are we trying or are we trying to just keep everything as is?
Yeah, I think conceptually, with the bicycle circulation, the bus drop-off, providing bike racks, when there aren't as many today, that's key. We want to encourage people, to drive less. And we know that in the Rinconada Park Plan, there's going to be some changes down the road over along Hopkins. There's a lot of street parking too. I know for commercial business, we don't consider that, but this is the Civic Center, Community Center, and street parking is something that is also on public property. So I think there's a little bit of different thinking for this type of a use. Again, there's an increase in zoo area. The animals will have a better experience and more place to reside. I don't think that necessarily results in more cars. Again, we're, and John can weigh in on the programmatic aspects of this, but, we're looking at, and you'll, when you do get the CEQA document, you can see description of this. We had hoped to have that in your packet last week, but it did get pushed a week. So we can have more conversation about that in the next report.
Okay, thanks.
Just a quick comment on the zoo area. I saw that in the central tree stump, you have this like glow-in-the-dark type of thing, right? Could you explain that perhaps a little bit, and if it's a reasonable thing considering how early public facilities close in Palo Alto and the possible detrimental effect towards the environment and animals in that area?
That's actually the tree fort, and that's actually part of the future phase 2.
Okay, so that's not technically a part of this project.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question for staff. Jody. Okay. So if we can you continue this to a date certain? Is there
Yes.
Is there a date in particular?
September 21st would be preferable.
Okay.
yeah, I think September 21st, we'll stick with that. And if they are able to beat that, we could always advertise it for earlier.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's
So I'd like to move that we continue this project to September 21st, subject to the comments we've made.
I'll second that.
great. So we have a motion to continue it by Balte and seconded by Guyer. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. And Board Member Firth is absent. Great, thank you. The project is looking good. We'll look to see this back in September.
Thank you.
Right, I saw that. Oh, they were actually supposed to have something.
Any other changes?
I thought it was a Xerox situation where they just.
I just printed those sheets out.
Okay, there are two other changes. One is the last sheet, just the description of this. So this is slightly updated, so this is added.
Okay, so the next item is number 3. It's the public hearing for a quasi-judicial matter, 2747 Park Boulevard. Recommendation on applicant's request for approval of a major architectural review to allow a master sign program. The master sign program is for a previously approved 33,323 square foot office building currently under construction. The environmental assessment is exempt from the provisions of CEQA in accordance with guideline section 15311 for accessory structures. The zone district is general manufacturing, and our project planner today is Graham Owen. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman Liu. So yes, I'm Graham Owen, planner with the city. I've been working with the applicant on the application that's here before you today. So as you said, this is a master sign program for the new R&D building, which is currently under construction at 2747 Park Boulevard. This master sign program is essentially it's a way of providing a framework for future tenant signage. So no tenants have been selected at this time for the building, which is under construction. But the applicant has expressed an interest, and the developer had expressed an interest in providing future tenants with basically a framework document that has basic design parameters for future tenants. The benefit for master sign programs is that once the framework document, once the master sign program has been approved, no further architectural review is required as long as signage is consistent with the master sign program. So the plans that are before you today do show logos and companies, but those are just examples, as no tenants have been selected at this time. This is a site plan showing the build out of the 2747 Park Boulevard project. The building is located at the apex, right at the corner of Park Boulevard and Sheridan Avenue in the Ventura neighborhood. And there are 10 total signs that are being requested with this application. 2 are freestanding tenant monument signs, which would be located at the vehicle entrances. Those would be 9 feet in total height and 54 square feet. There are 2 that would be 2 freestanding monument signs, which would be located at the building entrances, right at the apex, and then also facing the parking lot. 3 wall signs, one of which would be at the pedestrian level, directly facing Park Boulevard, and another that would be, or 2, excuse me, that would be located closer to the parapets of the building at the top. One facing the apex at the corner, and then one facing the Caltrain right-of-way. And then there would also be two signs, which would essentially be addresses, so 2747 numbers. This is an example of the freestanding monument signs, which should be located at the vehicle entrances. So as I mentioned, 9 feet in total height, 54 square feet in total sign area. These signs would be made out of aluminum, as well as a clear plastic material which would go on the cabinet. The signs would be externally illuminated, illumination from below, shining onto the sign. This is another example showing a different cabinet which shows 3 tenants instead of just 1. This is an example of the type of sign which would be proposed at the building entrances, slightly smaller, 5 feet in total height, smaller sign area, of course. The 2 that are proposed at the building entrances are not proposed to be illuminated. And then this is an example of the wall signs which would be located, as I call them, skyline signs, but the signs that would be located near the parapets of the building. This is proposed in 2 locations, and this example is slightly different from the iteration that you saw in the earlier plans that we provided in the packet. This shows an example of a total sign area of 120 square feet for the total sign area, and 2.5 feet in total height for the letters, which is what is requested with this application. These signs, the 2 signs that are mounted at the top of the building, would be channel lit, so internally illuminated signs. So staff is recommending approval of this application at this time. Would want to highlight two conditions of approval that are significant for the project. The freestanding monument signs, as I mentioned a couple of times, are 9 feet in total height as proposed. We felt that along the Park Boulevard corridor, you don't actually see that many monument signs to begin with, as we felt that a 9-foot high sign might be inappropriate for the neighborhood. And we're requesting through the conditions of approval that total height be lowered to 6 feet. The other is to ensure that the wall signs are compatible with the area. We're just reiterating that the letters for the wall signs be no more than 2.5 feet in total height, which is consistent with what is in the plans. So I believe that the applicant has a presentation as well, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Graham. Okay, so let's do the applicant presentation, and I think you have 5 minutes.
How does this turn on? Okay. Is this on? Is this on? Yeah, it seems to be on. All right. Should be. That's good. All right, thanks, Graham. My name is Julie Vogel. I'm from Kate Keating Associates, and this is Sean Reese. I'm president, and Sean is project manager for this particular project. And I think Graham did a really great job describing. There is only 10 signs. There's not a really elaborate presentation that we can expand on a great deal more. I think that a couple of things that we just want to highlight on a kind of like an overview, and that one is, the signs have been designed to the best of our ability to be compatible with the site and with the architecture, and the goal is to have the opportunity for the tenants to display their brand in a way that will give them the identity and still have a really nice site and experience on the street, and that's been the goal of the project all along. And we've kept the setbacks that are required. And one of the things about making, from our perspective, the potential of making the sign a lot shorter means that the footprint would expand considerably instead. And then we're trying to keep the sign out of the sight lines for the vision triangle and a very safe distance for viewing for people who are turning in and out of the parking lot. And if you see
This sign is the one that the staff is suggesting that we lower the size. And one of the reasons that we're concerned is right now, if this was to reduce by 6 feet to 6 feet, that's a 30% reduction. And right now, things like that, these are all make-believe companies, and we just make these logos up ourselves. But like, for example, the Tech Glow logo, the Tech Glow is only presently 5 inches tall. And the smaller the sign becomes, the more, the smaller the font has to become. And ideally, what we're trying to achieve here is a clear area that allows for these logos not to be kind of smashed on top of each other. And if the building was to lease one tenant per floor, that they all have enough clear space so it doesn't look kind of junky out there. And that's the goal, so that the font of the logo is large enough, the logos are not on top of each other, and they all have clear space, and that each of the 3 tenants potentially has the opportunity to be identified on the street. That's the goal, and kind of how we got to where we are. And again, the sign itself is of the same coloration and materiality of the building. And then also the one at the door here is we're planning to co-locate the card reader in it to kind of clarify the elevation as you enter the building. And those are really the only things I wanted to add to Graham's presentation. So if you guys have any questions, we'll be happy.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I do want to open it up to public comments. I don't have any speaker cards. And I think we also do need to do disclosures for this item.
Yeah, I'd like to disclose that I had an email exchange with Tom Gilman, the architect of the project, just asking questions about the wall sign.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board for the applicant?
I have a quick question. I'm wondering if maybe this is more comment-oriented, but you're showing a multi-tenant monument sign on the street, but the freestanding door tenant monument, you're only showing a single tenant. So what are your plans if you're going to have multi-tenants for that door tenant monument?
That's a good question. The idea of both of those signs is if the whole building goes with one tenant,
then it's easy, but
they would like it would either look like that E-Logic or the Tech Glow. But if the building went with 3 tenants, both of the signs would have a similar layout, where you would have the.
So you would divide the door tenant signage into 3 as well.
Yes.
And you're confident that you can get your desired height for lettering?
Well, at that point, the sign is basically a greeting for the front door. It's more of a pedestrian scale, and the goal is not really to have a vehicular, experience with that sign.
Okay, thank you.
Peter.
Two questions, please. I don't know staff or the applicant, but down the street from this is the Groupon building. It's sort of a brick building. How tall are the letters of the Groupon logo?
We looked that up. They're 2 feet and 3 inches.
The second question for the applicant. I dug up a perspective rendering of this project as we approved it. And I'm wondering, on this rendering, can you say where the large Tech Glow, as you've put it, logo would be as the building curves around? Your elevation on sheet 3.02 doesn't really specify where in the curve it would be if you've decided that, but there seems to be a roof overhang that varies in thickness, in depth, and I would think that would matter.
The intention is to have it at the apex of the corner. If the plan kind of describes that a little bit better.
Right there. So right in the middle, sort of halfway around the curve. Okay, thank you.
Okay, board member comments? Peter?
Yes, thank you. I share staff's concern that the monument sign is just too tall. In fact, I think 6 feet is even too tall. As I go around that neighborhood, there really are no monument signs, and that's the size sign you'd have for when you're traveling down El Camino or even a larger street moving 30 miles an hour. Nobody drives that fast. This is a pedestrian-dominated area. It will become much more pedestrian-dominated. Signs that are 1.5 times the height of a person, as your drawing so aptly demonstrates, is really inappropriate. And I can share your concern about the height of your fonts and stuff, but you're talented sign makers. I'm sure you can come around making signs that are pedestrian scaled. I've said this about many buildings and projects in this area. This Park Avenue south of Oregon is a rapidly changing area in our community, and it is astonishing how many people are walking around on foot in that community. And I think we all need to really consider that as a pedestrian area, and the signage has to reflect that. These are signs made for high vehicular passing by. That's your intent, that's your objective doing it, and it works for that, but it's not the right place for it. So I think at a minimum the signs have to go down to 6 feet. I'd like to see it less than that. My second concern is with the large logo on the wall of the building. As I just pointed out, I pulled up the architectural rendering of it, and I just don't understand how you put a channel-mounted big sign on a glazed curtain wall, and I don't see how that's integrated to the building when the facade is curving in one way and the roof overhang is a little bit different. It just seems to me that it's sort of stuck on as a logo, and that's not integrated to the building. So I'm eager to hear what my fellow board members think, and I'm happy to pass around this rendering, but I don't think that a large sign on the wall of the building is integrated to the architecture. Other than that, I think the materials are fine.
Robert.
Okay. I agree that the monument sign probably is too big for what it is based on the comments you've already said, so I'll just leave it at that. Yeah, the problem with a lot of these signs that go in front of curtain walls, either they secure them from the roof down, so you see the support system behind it, and to make it somewhat freestanding. And I find it a strange place to put it right at the curb. I think it ought to either go, if you're going to put the sign, it ought to get on either this end or that end, if it has to be at that front end. And but I don't want to see it, I wouldn't really want to see it right at the bend. First of all, I think it's going to be a situation that if you've got something that's freestanding letters, but if you end up having something that is some sort of different configuration, it might even be difficult to make it on a bend like that. So other than, like I said, you know, it's not rocket science, so I'm not too upset. Most of it is okay, other than the sign I think needs to be smaller, and I'm not a big fan of the larger sign right at the bend.
Okay, and Q.
Yeah, thank you for presenting the master sign program package here. I will agree that I think the freestanding monument signs at the parking entrances are a little too large. I don't think that they would be too large if these signs were on a busier street, but I think considering the pace of traffic along these two minor streets off of Park and the dominance of pedestrian traffic, I do think they'll begin to dwarf the people and almost give the building a sense of you know, a standoffish feeling almost. I think it'd be better if they could be reduced in size and maybe present the building as a little bit more welcoming and pedestrian scale. The concern there, of course, with the area and the size of it is not so much the actual area of the logos. I think there's ways that you could keep the logos and their areas the same while reducing the sign in overall size. So I think there's something that could be done there. I disagree with a previous comment that the materials are okay. For me, these tenant monument signs that are freestanding, to me, they actually lack a little bit of depth. I think it's a little bit too plain, and I'm almost curious to see what these look like in 3D with the shape of the curve and you know, the plastic, how much reflection we get. I think there needs to be a little bit more thought put into the depth of the materials, and I was looking at the materials board and the materials that were used on the building itself. I don't know if there's another material that can be picked off from the building and incorporated into the signage. I do share concerns about the wall-mounted sign, less so about the one facing the train tracks, but more so about the one facing Park and Sheridan. I'm also curious to know how that's going to work on the curved surface, but more so than that, just the fact that we're kind of slapping that onto the glass surface, I don't know is the best way to go about that. I also have questions and concerns regarding the raceway connecting the letters in that case. Somebody brought up previously that often these are not just directly mounted onto the glass, but hung off of the roof. That was something I was going to possibly suggest, but I realized that the roof changes in depth there, the eave overhang, so I don't know if that's possible. Yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
We're going back to Robert.
I have one comment, and this is probably just being totally anal on my part, but on 2.05, where the actual building address is, I have a real problem with the relationship of the letters to the material in back of it. In other words, the seam right in between the 4 and the 7. And I know, like I said, that is, either it gets shifted so that the address is completely centered on one tile or something like that. It's just, like I said, it's an anal comment. And, maybe by the time they get done, and depending on the size of the joint, it may not be an issue, but like this, it just really rubbed me the wrong way. So if nothing else, it's on the record.
Okay, so I think my comment is that it seems like we have a higher standard for signs in the city, and in particular in the adjacent research park. So for example, like Stanford, on Stanford land, they don't allow any wall signs. So you go all down Page Mill Road, you won't see any wall signs. And all of the monument signs, most of them, they're all very, very low. From my point of view, I think they're too small. Like, I think I understand the sign maker's point of view. You want them to be readable. And I think what I found, at least in the research park, is that when they have a multi-tenant building and they require the monument signs to be really low, they put them side by side in these really small fonts. And I don't think that they look very good, and to me, they're hard to read. But that's Stanford. I mean, that's Stanford. That's their rules for signs there. But it creates a really beautiful landscape environment. And then I think the hard thing I've been struggling with on your site is I think I agree with the board member comments that it's there's a lot of pedestrian activity, like at lunchtime. But I find the intersection on this particular site to be very confusing. Like, if I were a visitor, I wouldn't really know exactly where I was supposed to go or where to park. And I would think if I were like the building owner, I wouldn't want like Caltrain people to park in the lot, because it's right adjacent to the Caltrain parking lot. So I think I understand the desire for the placement of the monument signs for the parking lot. I think I would just I don't have a smaller proposal, the 6-foot proposal, but at the moment I would just say I would concur with the staff condition of approval. I think it would be a question for the board is, do you want to see this again, or do you want to just let the staff's recommendation or the staff's condition of approval to make it smaller, to just let it stand and without having seen it? If we continue it, it would allow them to make another case for something in between. So I think that's an open question for me.
Well, I mean, if you want an answer to that, I have actually more of a problem with the wall sign than I do the
I
monument
was
sign.
going to get,
So,
right, I was going to get
if
that.
I was going, I would trust the judgment of either proportionally, going from 9 feet down to 7.5 feet or something like that, even if it doesn't go all the way down to 6, because I can understand where the applicant's coming from. The wall sign is what I have more of a problem with.
Okay. And then on the wall sign, I would say previously the board had a lot of issues with like this. There's a Survey Monkey sign, which was hung with a structure. It was hung from the cornice of the tower, and that was an issue. It still got a. Well, it did. Yeah, it did. It was.
Well,
they left pretty quickly.
A fairly short time.
Yes, but the sign did go up, and the armature to hold the sign up was not beautiful, but I think we made it better, and so I just want to just remind the board that for us to, when buildings come through, to ask for placeholder locations for signs on other projects, because it's an issue, and then at the same time is the I think we have to sort of acknowledge that it's the desire for signs on buildings is changing. At one time, we really didn't have any office tenants putting wall signs up on the cornice of buildings, but it is an issue, and they do want them, even here in the downtown district. So I just want to just sort of put that out there, that things change. So, and I think I'm in agreement with the placement of the wall sign on the curve. It seems strange. I think I would rather have it on one end or the other. I'm okay with the one on the back. The one on the back seems a little strange to me in terms of placement. And I think my take on it is that you guys want to come back to the board? Is that where?
Well, I'm certainly not ready to approve the wall sign, and I'm skeptical that they'll be able to find a place on the curved facade to make it work. A sign of the size they're talking about, you just don't have a chunk of building that supports that. And maybe the question really is they're asking for a master sign program, so there's not even really any firm proposal of where.
Right, it would depend on the tenant.
That was in my email exchange with Tom Gilman. He made that very clear that this is still very dependent. Maybe what we can do is approve the sign program with the change to the monument, but just don't approve the wall sign, and that has to come back as a ARB project when they figure out what they want to do exactly, so we can see the mounting details and the exact specifics of it. I think it's important on a building like this with a fairly dramatic appearance that the signage not be just stuck on the glass wall.
But that's why you do a master sign program, so that you don't have to come back. I mean, we can't say, yes, we'll approve the master plan, but you have to come back anyway. Then you're sort of defeating the purpose of.
Well, maybe a master sign program's inappropriate for this situation.
Well, that could be, but I mean, that's why they're doing it.
Okay, well,
it gives them
I hear you. I'm not able to approve the wall sign.
Right. I mean, I think the board.
So maybe staff can chime in.
Yeah, I think the board could recommend no, and then the staff can come back with a response on how to proceed.
Yeah, I'm open to whatever mechanism is appropriate. I'd have a big issue with that wall sign the way it's presented.
I think it's up to the board how you'd like to proceed. I mean, we can certainly bring it back. I mean, if we were going to bring it back, it would need to be probably September 21st, though. You also have the subcommittee option if you felt like there were some smaller refinements that needed to be made.
Okay.
Well, let me suggest that if you're okay with the sign on the back, is that basically because it's just facing the railroad tracks, or is it because it looks better or it works better on that portion of the building?
Yeah, for me, it was that it works better on that side of the building, but I am still curious to see the actual mounting details.
Well, yeah, but what I was going to suggest, if that's the case, then maybe on the front, maybe we don't allow the sign to go on the curved portion and put it on the far end of the building, on the south end of the building at the corner.
Right, which is actually in my mind, is a better location.
Then
because it would give you
then
visibility
you could do
from Page Mill Road.
basically a sign that, or I should say a mounting situation that basically mirrors the two, that they could be the same, then there isn't a difference. I mean, that's
Yeah,
an
I'd be okay with that.
alternative.
Hi, can we comment on that?
Yes, please.
The thinking of the location on the curve and the apex is that this is capturing specifically like Oregon Expressway and the traffic that's moving through the neighborhood. And to put it further to kind of mirror what's facing Caltrain is and put it towards the corner of Park and Page Mill. There's a lot of trees and there's adjacent development, and you would actually kind of never see that sign from the sight line. So the locations are chosen by sight lines of what's actually visible. And if I can speak a little bit to how it's attached, the way we would detail these, we've done a lot of these with the DES, is that the mullion system itself gets brackets and it has support and nothing comes over the roof. And then all of the raceway is generally as minimal as it can be to handle the LED equipment, which is much smaller than it used to be, and it's painted to kind of black out. And this is on glass, but it's spandrel glass, so it's not visual glass, so it's basically a solid surface anyway. And the goal is to have these letters be up there kind of floating, and you just don't have a lot of perception by the location. Even though it's on glass, it has the framework and the raceways are all painted to kind of black out.
Well, part of that is that, let's say that spandrel glass was stucco. It's not even so much what that is. I just don't really like the thing right on the curved corner of the building. Mm-hmm. It's not so much that it, I mean, it is, I mean, you've got two things there, working against it. But like I said, even if that was a solid band, I would have a problem with it right on the apex of the curve.
As I look at it more, I find even the sign on the back just seems to me haphazardly across the mullions and the windows and then the solid wall, and it's just not integrated with the architecture. And
Well,
I
it's
think
the same thing as what I said with the sign, the address sign. It's put on, but it doesn't relate to the
Right.
wall behind it.
Yeah. I mean, I think with all respect, your renderings even to us show us a sign that in a two-dimensional rendering on a curved facade, the letters are all the same dimension. There's no sense of graphic curving to it. You're not even thinking about the curve in your signage. And I guess I'm having a trouble with the big wall sign in this building. I'm questioning whether we even really should have a wall sign here at all, honestly. I mean, somehow the Groupon sign is so much more subdued. You see that from a distance. It's just a big brick building. We have to make a finding that it's integrated with the architecture. And I'm unable to do that the way it's presented. So the only solution is to say no or to continue it.
Me too.
Okay, well, I think my recommendation to the board would be to continue it because they are allowed, like the sign code allows them a certain amount of signs. So I would say let them have another stab at this and
That's fine.
And continue it to, I think the staff was saying September 21st.
So I will move that we continue this item so that it comes back to the board for September 21st and have the applicant reconsider the wall signs and how they relate to the building so that they do better relate to the actual architecture of the building, and also to reduce the freestanding tenant monument signs at the parking lot entries to be maximum 6 feet tall.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, so we have a motion by Board Member Kim, seconded by Balte. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None. So that passes 4-0 with Board Member Firth absent. Okay, thank you. We will see you in September. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we have one last item, which is the approval of the minutes for July 13th, and that was the ARB meeting as well as a HRB ARB meeting. Are there any comments from the board? No. I have one comment. on the minutes. This is on page 16. And there was just a board member Firth was dissenting from the vote.
Which set of minutes is this? The joint or the ARB only?
I think this is the ARB only. This was the, I think those are the Alma Peters project, Alma. The 3 houses on Alma Street. Anyway, it's just, the word in the minutes is decent, and it's dissent. And I think that's nitpicky, but I think that one's, it's important for the meaning of her comment. Okay, so I'll move that we approve both sets of minutes for July 13th. And I think, Peter, you have to recuse yourself on part of it, right?
I wasn't at the meeting, so I won't.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's right.
So I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
Great. So that passes 3011. Okay, we are adjourned.